press the button. Oh wait, no. Yeah, I did. Huh. That was laggy. But yes, I am recording now. Oh, that means I should, I'm gonna put these back on here. And then I'm gonna put, jeez, my fucking feet are super cracked. Okay. There we go. Alright, so we left off with John the Savage was being shown around the New World by Bernard. And everyone is so intrigued by him. And they don't pay any attention to who Linda is, because she was a modern person that became pregnant and, gave birth, which is super not with the status quo of things. But yes, I think Lanina also invited John the Savage to spend some time with her, and she was trying to get him to sleep with her, stuff like that. All right. But yeah, let's start. So now we're on chapter 12. Oh wait, I should have my glasses on. It's a bad habit that I'm not wearing my glasses. Okay. Okay. So, chapter 12. Bernard had to shout through the locked door. The savage would not open. But everybody's there, waiting for you. Let them wait, came back the muffled voice through the door. But you know quite well, John, how difficult it is to sound persuasive at the top of one's voice. I asked them on purpose to meet you. You ought to have asked me first whether I wanted to meet them. But you always came before, John. That's precisely why I don't want to come again. Just to please me. Bernard. Just to please me? Bernard bellowingly wheedled. Won't you come to please? No, won't you come to please me? No. Do you seriously mean it? Yes. Despairingly. But what shall I do? Bernard wailed. Go to hell, bawled the exasperated voice from within. But the Ark Community Songster of Canterbury is there tonight. Bernard was almost in tears. Ayuya Takwa. It was only in Zwini. Yeah, it was only in Zwini that the savage could adequately express what he felt about the arch community songster. Honey, he added as an afterthought. And then, with that derisivity, sons esto stena, and he spat out on the ground. Yeah, he spat on the ground, as Pope might have done. In the end, Bernard had to slink back, diminished to his rooms, and inform the impatient assembly that the savage would not be appearing that night. The news was received not. The news was received with indignation. The men were furious at having been tricked into behaving politely to this insignificant fellow with the unsavory reputation and the heretical opinions. The higher their position in the hierarchy, the deeper their resentment. To play such a joke on me, the arch songster kept repeating. On me! As for the women, they indignantly left that. Oh no. As for the women, they indignantly felt that they had been on. As for the women, they indignantly felt that they had been had on false pretenses, had by which a wretched little man who had had alcohol poured into his bottle by mistake, by a creature with a gamma minus physique. It was an outrage, and they said so more and more loud. And it was an outrage, and they said so more and more loudly. The headmistress of Eton was particularly scathing. Lenina alone said nothing. Pale, her blue eyes clouded with an unwanted melancholy. She sat in the corner, cut off from those who surrounded her in an emotion which they did not share. She had come to the party filled with a strange feeling of anxiety, of anxious exultation. In a few minutes, she said to herself as she entered the room, I shall be seeing him, talking to him, telling him, for she had come with her mind made up, that I like him more than anybody I've ever known. And then perhaps he'll say, what would he say? The blood had rushed to her cheeks. Why was he so strange the other night, after the Feelies? So queer, and yet I'm absolutely sure he does not. So queer, and yet I'm absolutely sure he really does rather like me, I'm sure. It was at this moment that Bernard had made his announcement. The savage wasn't coming to the party. Lenina felt all the sensations normally experienced at the beginning of a violent passion surrogate treatment. Hold on. Not violent. Violent. Let me say that again. Lenina suddenly felt all the sensations normally experienced at the beginning of a violent passion surrogate treatment. A sense of dreadful emptiness, a breathless apprehension, a nausea. Her heart seemed to stop beating. Perhaps it's because he doesn't like me, she said to herself, and at once this possibility became an established certainty. John had refused to come because he didn't like her. He didn't like her. It really is a bit too thick, the headmistress of Eton was saying to the director of crematoria in phosphorus reclamation. When I think that I actually... Yes, came the voice of Fanny Crown. It's absolutely true about the alcohol. Someone I knew someone who was working in the embryo store at the time. She said to my friend, and my friend said to me, too bad, said Henry Foster, sympathizing with the arch community songster. It may interest you to know that our ex-director was on the point of transferring him to Iceland. Pierced by hold on. Sorry, I just saw something. Pierced by every word that was spoken, the tight balloon of Bernard's happy self-confidence was leaking from 1,000 wounds. Pale, distraught, abject, and agitated, he moved among his guests, stammering incoherent apologies, assuring them that next time the savage would certainly be there, begging them to sit down and take a carotene sandwich, a slice of... What the heck? Yeah, I'm just gonna mute that. Mute. Hopefully for 15 minutes. If it goes on, I'm gonna mute them again. The group chat. Alright. Anyway. Yeah. Pale, distraught, abject, and agitated, he moved among his guests, stammering incoherent apologies, assuring them that next time the savage would certainly be there, begging them to sit down and take a carotene sandwich, a slice of vitamin A pate, a glass of champagne surrogate. They duly ate, but ignored him, drank, and were either rude to his face or talked to one another about him, loudly and offensively, as though he had not been there. And now, my friends, said the arch community songster of Canterbury, in that beautiful ringing voice with which he led the proceedings at Ford's Day celebrations. Now, my friends, I think perhaps the time has come. He rose, put down his glass, brushed from his purple viscose waistcoat the crumbs of a considerable collation, and walked towards the door. Bernard darted forward to intercept him. Must you really, arch songster? It's very early still. I'd hoped you would. Yes, what hadn't he hoped? When Lenina confidently told him that the arch community songster would accept an invitation if it were sent. He's really rather sweet, you know. And she had known Bernard, the little golden zipper fastening. Wait, and she had known Bernard, the little, oh, not known, shown. And she had shown Bernard the little golden zipper fastening in the form of a tea, which the arch songster had given her as a memento of the weekend she spent at Lambeth, to meet the arch community songster of Canterbury and Mr. Savage. Bernard had proclaimed his triumph on every invitation card, but the savage had chosen this evening of all evenings to lock himself up in his room, to shout "Hani," and even, it was lucky that Bernard didn't understand Zuni, "Sons esos stena," which would have been the crowning moment of Bernard's whole career, had turned out to be the moment of his greatest humiliation. I'd so much hoped, he stammeringly repeated, looking up at the great dignitary with pleading and distracted eyes. My young friend, said the arch community songster in a tone of loud and solemn severity. It was a general silence. Let me give you a word of advice. He wagged his finger at Bernard. Before it's too late, a word of good advice. His voice became sepulchral. Or sepulchral? I think it's sepulchral. Hold on. I just want to adjust myself. And I'm going to... sepulchral. Yeah, sepulchral. His voice became sepulchral. Mend your ways, my young friend. Mend your ways. He made the sign of the T over him and turned away. Lenina, my dear, he called in another tone. Come with me. Obedient, but unsmiling, the whole and wholly insensible of the honor done to her, without elation. Lenina walked after him, out of the room. The other guests followed at a respectable interval. The last of them slammed the door. Bernard was all alone. Punctured and utterly deflated, he dropped into a chair and, covering his face with his hands, began to weep. A few minutes later, however, he thought better of it and took 4 tablets of soma. Upstairs in his room, the savage was reading Romeo and Juliet. Lenina and the arch community songster stepped out onto the roof of the Lambeth Palace. Hurry up, my young friend. Lenina, called the arch songster impatiently from the lift gates. Lenina, who had lingered for a moment to look at the moon, dropped her eyes and came hurrying across the roof to rejoin him. A New Theory of Biology was the title of the paper which Mustafa Mond had just finished reading. He sat for some time, meditatively frowning, then picked up his pen and wrote across the title page. The author's mathematical treatment of the conception of purpose is novel and highly ingenious, but heretical, and so far as the present social order is concerned, dangerous and potentially subversive, not to be published. He underlined the words. The author will be kept under supervision. His transference to the Marine Biological Station of St. Helena may become necessary. A pity, he thought, as he signed his name. It was a masterly piece of work, but once he began admitting explanations in terms of purpose, well, you didn't know what the result might be. It was the sort of idea that might easily decondition the more unsettled minds among the higher castes, make them lose their faith in happiness as the sovereign good, and take to believing instead that the goal was somewhere beyond, somewhere outside the present human sphere, that the purpose of life was not the maintenance of well-being, but some intensification and refining of consciousness, some enlargement of knowledge, which was the controller reflected, quite possibly true, but not in the present circumstances admissible. He picked up his pen again, and under the words "not to be published," drew a second line, thicker and blacker than the first, then signed. What fun it would be, he thought, if one didn't have to think about happiness. With closed eyes, his face shining with rapture, John was softly disclaiming to vacancy. She doth teach me the torches to burn she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night, like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. The gold tea lay shining on Lenina's bosom. Sportively, the arch community songster caught hold of it. Sportively. He pulled and pulled. I think, said Lenina, suddenly breaking a long silence. I think I'd better take a couple of grams of soma. Bernard, by this time, was fast asleep, smiling out of the private paradise of his dreams. Smiling, but inexorably, yeah, inexorably, inex- I feel like I might be saying this word wrong, but I think I'm right. But I just want to make sure. Inexorable. Inexorable. Inexorably. There we go. But inexorably, every 30 seconds, the minute hand of the electric clock above his bed jumped forward with an almost imperceptible click. Click, 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 click. And it was morning. Bernard was back among the miseries of space and time. It was in the lowest spirits that he taxied across his work at the conditioning center. The intoxication of success had evaporated. He was soberly his old self, and by contrast with the temporary balloon of these last weeks, the old self seemed unprecedentedly heavier than the surrounding atmosphere. To this deflated Bernard, the savage showed himself unexpectedly sympathetic. You're more like what you were at Malpais, he said, when Bernard had told him his plaintive story. Do you remember when we first talked together? Outside the little house. You're like what you were then. Because I'm unhappy again, that's why. Well, I'd rather be unhappy than have the sort of false lying happiness you were having here. I like that, said Bernard bitterly. When it's you who were the cause of it all, refusing to come to my party and so turning them all against me. He knew that what he was saying was absurd in its injustice. He admitted inwardly, and at last even aloud, the truth of all that the savage now said about the worthlessness of friends who could be turned upon so slight a provocation into persecuting enemies. But in spite of this knowledge and these admissions, in spite of the fact that his friends' support and sympathy were now his only comfort, Bernard continued perversely to nourish, along with his quite genuine affection, a secret grievance against the savage, to meditate a campaign of small revenges to be wreaked upon him. Nourishing a grievance against the arch community songster was useless. There was no possibility of being revenged on the chief bottler or the assistant predestinator. As a victim, the savage possessed, for Bernard, this enormous superiority over the others, that he was accessible. One of the principal functions of a friend is to suffer, in a milder and symbolic form, the punishments that we should like, but are unable to afflict upon our enemies. Let me read that again. It made sense, but I'm just like, wait, that's not right. One of the principal functions of a friend is to suffer, in a milder and symbolic form, the punishments that we should like, but are unable to inflict upon our enemies. Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, I have friends so I can fuck them up because I can't fuck up my enemies. So I'll just, traumatize my friends instead because they deserve it in a symbolic sort of way. Yeah, no. That's that's fucked up. Just because you're unhappy sort of thing. All right. Bernard's other victim friend was Helmholtz. When discom when discomfited, he came and asked once more for the friendship which, in his prosperity, he had not thought it worth his while to preserve. Helmholtz gave it, and gave it without a reproach, without a comment, as though he had forgotten that there had ever been a quarrel. Touched, Bernard felt himself at the same time humiliated by this magnanimity. Yeah, magnanimity. I'm gonna have to say this a few times. So yeah, magnanimity. 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 I'm gonna look it up so I can see how it's properly. Magnanimity. 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 Mag mag magnanimity. Magnanimity. Yeah, this is a weird. It's a hard word. This is how it's spelled, you guys. Magnanimity. Wait, did I just say Hold on, I said it wrong. I was thinking about manga. It's magnanimity. Magnanimity. I swear they hit me with all these hard words. The magnanimity. The magnanimity. Hold on. It's not making me upset just yet. Magnanimity. 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 Okay. Hopefully I get it right. Touched. Yeah. Touched, Bernard felt himself at the same time humiliated by this humiliated by this magnanimity. I'm sorry. By this nagma. Yeah. Humiliated by this magnanimity. 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 Yeah, touched, Bernard felt himself at the same time humiliated by this magnanimity. Magnanimity. Yeah, I have to say this word fucking twice. Yeah, humiliated by this magnanimity. A magnanimity, the more. Yeah, a magnanimity, the more extraordinary, and therefore the more humiliating in that it owed nothing to Soma and everything to Helmholtz's character. It was the Helmholtz of daily life who forgot and forgave, not the Helmholtz of a half-gram holiday. Bernard was duly grateful. It was an enormous comfort to have his friend again, and also duly resentful. It would be pleasure to take some revenge on Helmholtz for his generosity. At their first meeting after the estrangement, Bernard poured out the tale of his miseries and accepted consolation. It was not till some days later that he learned, to his surprise and with a twinge of shame, that he was not the only one who had been in trouble. Helmholtz had also come into conflict with authority. It was over some rhymes, he explained. I was giving my usual course of advanced emotional engineering for third-year students, 12 lectures, of which the 7th is about rhymes, on the use of rhymes in moral propaganda and advertisement, to be precise. I always illustrate my lecture with a lot of technical examples. This time I thought I'd give them one I'd just written myself. Pure madness, of course, but I couldn't resist it. He laughed. I was curious to see what their reaction would be. Besides, he added, more gravely, I wanted to do it. I wanted to do a bit of propaganda. I was trying to engineer them into feeling as I'd felt when I wrote the rhymes. Ford! He laughed. What an outcry there was. The principal had me up and threatened to hand me the immediate sack. I'm a marked man. But what were your rhymes? Bernard asked. They were about being alone. Bernard's eyebrows went up. I'll recite them to you if you like. And Helmholtz began. Yesterday's committee. Sticks, but a broken drum. Midnights in the city. Flutes in a vacuum. Shut lips, sleeping faces. Every stopped machine. The dumb and littered places. Where crowds have been. All silences rejoice. Weep, loudly or low. Speak, but with the voice of whom I do not know. Absence, says of Susan's. Absence of Agaria's. Arms and respective bosoms, lips and posteriors. Slowly form a presence. Whose, and I ask of what? So absurd in essence that something which is not nevertheless should populate empty night more solidly than that with which we copulate. Why should it seem so squalidly? Well, I gave them that as an example, and they reported me to the principal. I'm not surprised, said Bernard. It's flatly against all their sleeping teaching. All their sleeping teaching. Their sleep teaching. Yeah. It's flatly against all their sleep teaching. Remember, they've had at least 250,000 warnings against solitude. I know, but I thought I'd like to see what the effect would be. Well, you've seen now. Helmholtz only laughed. I feel, he said after a silence, as though I were just beginning to have something to write about. as though I were beginning to be able to use that power I feel. Yeah, wait. Let me start that again from the top. Ugh. Also, I'm adjusting myself. God, that's so annoying. Okay. Helmholtz only laughed. I feel, he said, after a silence, as though I were just beginning to have something to write about, as though I were beginning to be able to use that power I feel I've got inside of me, that extra latent power. Something seems to be coming to me. In spite of all his troubles, he seemed, Bernard thought, profoundly happy. Helmholtz and the Savage took to one another. Helmholtz and the Savage took to one another at once, so cordially, so cordially. So cordially indeed that Bernard felt a sharp pang of jealousy. In all these weeks, I had never come to so close an intimacy with the Savage as Helmholtz immediately achieved. Watching them, listening to their talk, he found himself sometimes resentfully wishing that he had never brought them together. He was ashamed of his jealousy and alternately made efforts of will and took Soma to keep himself from feeling it. But the efforts were not very successful, and between the Soma holidays there were of necessity, intervals. The odious sentiment kept on returning. At his third meeting with the Savage, Helmholtz recited his rhymes on solitude. "What do you think of them?" he asked when he had done. The Savage shook his head. "Listen to this," was his answer, and unlocking the drawer in which he kept his mouse-eaten book, he recited and read. "Let the bird of loudest lay on the sole Arabian tree, herald sad and trumpet be." Helmholtz listened with a growing excitement. At sole Arabian tree, he started out, "Thou shrieking harbinger." He smiled with sudden pleasure at every fowl of tyrant wing. The blood rushed up to his cheeks, but at defunctive music, he turned pale and trembled with an unprecedented emotion. The Savage read on. Property was thus appalled that the self was not the same. Single nature's double name, either two nor one, was called. Reason in itself confounded, saw division grow together. "Orgy porgy," said Bernard, interrupting the reading with a loud, unpleasant laugh. "It's just a solidarity service hymn. He was revenging himself on his two friends for liking one another more than they liked him. In the course of their next 2 or 3 meetings, he frequently repeated the same little act of vengeance. It was simple, and since both Helmholtz and the Savage were dreadfully pained by the shattering and defilement of a favorite poetic crystal. Right? He's not letting his friends, hang out together. That's pretty toxic. Like, yeah, I get, like, when your friend meets another person and they hang out. Yeah. I get that that's, like, you can get jealous and stuff, but you can't. It's kind of rude to interrupt, you know, when they hang out and stuff. All because you're not happy. But I don't think Bernard was ever happy in his life. Alright. Nope. And I guess the rumors are true. According to Fanny. But how reliable is Fanny? Okay. Not. Yeah. Alright. It was simple, and since both of Helmholtz and the Savage were dreadfully pained by the shattering and defilement of a favorite poetic crystal, extremely effective. In the end, Helmholtz threatened to kick him out of the room if he dared to interrupt again. And yet, strangely enough, the next interruption, the most disgraceful of all, came of Helmholtz himself. The Savage was reading Romeo and Juliet aloud. Reading. For all the time he was seeing himself as Romeo and Lenina was Juliet, with an intense and quivering passion. Helmholtz had listened to the scene of the lovers' first meeting with a puzzled interest. The scene in the orchard had delighted him with its poetry, but the sentiments expressed had made him smile. Getting into such a state about having a girl, it seemed rather ridiculous, but taken detail by verbal detail, what a superb piece of emotional engineering. That old fellow, he said. He makes our best propaganda technicians look absolutely silly. The Savage smiled triumphantly and resumed his reading. All went tolerably well until, in the last scene of the third act, Capulet? Capulet? Is it Capulet or Capulet? I've never read Romeo and Juliet. And if I did, I probably forgot about it. But I don't think I did. Capulet? I think it's Capulet. Hold on. Capulet. Oh, it seemed to have... Yeah, I think because it recognized it as a Shakespeare character. Okay, yeah, so Capulet. All went tolerably well until, and the last scene of the third act. Capulet and Lady Capulet began to bully Juliet to marry Paris. Helmholtz had been restless throughout the entire scene, but when, pathetically mimed by the Savage, Juliet cried out, "Is there no pity sitting in the clouds that sees into the bottom of my grief? Oh, sweet my mother, cast me not anyway. Delay this marriage for a month, a week, or if you do not, make the bridal bed in that dim monument where Tybalt lies." When Juliet said this, Helmholtz broke out in an explosion of uncontrollable guffawing. The mother and father, grotesque obscenity, forcing the daughter to have someone she didn't want, and the idiotic girl not saying that she was having someone else, whom, for the moment, at any rate, she preferred. Yeah, and the idiotic girl not saying that she was having someone else whom, for the moment, at any rate, she preferred. In its smutty absurdity, the situation was irresistibly comical. He had managed, with a heroic effort, to hold down the mounting pressure of his hilarity. But, sweet mother, and the savage's tremulous tone of anguish, and the reference to Tybalt lying dead, but evidently cremated and wasting his phosphorus on a dim monument, were too much for him. He laughed and laughed till the tears streamed down his face, quenchlessly laughed, and while pale, quenchlessly laughed, while, pale with a sense of outrage, the savage looked at him over the top of his book, and then, as the laughter still continued, closed it indigently, got up, and, with the gesture of one who removes his pearl from before swine, locked it away in its drawer. "And yet," said Helmholtz, when, having recovered breath enough to apologize, he had mollified the savage into listening to his explanations. "I know quite well that one needs ridiculous, mad situations like that. One can't write really well about anything else. But why was that old fellow such a marvelous propaganda technician? Because he had so many insane, excruciating things to get excited about. You've got to be hurt and upset. Otherwise, you can't think of the really good, penetrating, X-ray-ish phrases. But fathers and mothers?" He shook his head. "You can't expect me to keep a straight face about fathers and mothers. And who's going to get excited about a boy having a girl and not having her?" The savage winced, but Helmholtz, who was staring pensively at the floor, saw nothing. "No," he concluded with a sigh, "it won't do. We need some other kind of madness and violence. But what? What? Where can one find it?" He was silent. Then, shaking his head, "I don't know," he said at last. "I don't know." And that's the end. And that's the end of chapter 13. Chapter 12. Chapter 12. All right. On to chapter 13. Hold on. Alright. Yeah, chapter 13. Henry Foster loomed up through the twilight of the embryo store. "Like to come to Ophelia this evening?" Lenina shook her head without speaking. "Going out with someone else?" It interested him to know which one of his friends was being had by each other. "Is it Benito?" he questioned. She shook her head again. Henry dejected with wariness in those purple eyes. Hold on. Let me do something real quick. Okay, I just needed to change my pajamas. She shook her head again. Henry detected the wariness in those purple eyes, the pallor beneath that gaze of lupus, the sadness at the corners of the unsmiling crimson mouth. "You're not feeling ill, are you?" he added, a trifle anxiously, afraid that she might be suffering from one of the new remaining infectious diseases. Yet, once more, Lenina shook her head. "Anyhow, you ought to go and see the doctor," said Henry. "A doctor a day keeps the jam away," he added, heartily, driving home his hypnopaetic adage. Or, yeah, I think it's adage. Or adage. Yeah, driving home his hypnopaetic adage with a clap on the shoulder. "Perhaps you need a pregnancy substitute," he suggested, or else an extra strong VPS treatment. Sometimes, the standard passion servant isn't enough. "Oh, for Ford's sake," said Lenina, breaking her stubborn silence. "Shut up!" And she turned back to her neglected embryos. A VPS treatment indeed. She would have laughed if she hadn't been on the point of crying, as though she hadn't got enough VP of her own. She sighed profoundly as she refilled her syringe. "John," she murmured to herself. "John. Then, my Ford," she wondered. "Have I given this one its sleeping sickness injection, or haven't I?" She simply couldn't remember. In the end, she decided not to run the risk of letting it have a second dose, and moved down the line to the next bottle. 22 years, 8 months, and 4 days from that moment, a promising young Alpha-Minus administrator at Mwanza was to die of trypanosomiasis, the first case in over half a century. Sighing, Lenina went on with her work. Damn. Yeah, let me research what that is. I don't think it's made up. I think it's Oh, I guess it's just a parasite. Yep. Yeah, so down the line, 22 years later from that innocent incident, that embryo is going to die from a parasite because she didn't give him his injection, because she didn't want to risk giving him twice the injection. At least they lived for 22 years, 8 months, and 4 days. Yeah, let me read that again. 22 years, 8 months, and 4 days from that moment, a promising young Alpha-Minus administrator. Oh, so he's an Alpha. So he's important. Yeah, a promising young Alpha-Minus administrator at Mwanza was to die of trypanosomiasis, the first case in over half a century. Sighing, Lenina went on with her work. An hour later, in the changing room, Fanny was energetically protesting. But it's absurd that you... Yeah, an hour later, in the changing room, Fanny was energetically protesting. But it's absurd to let yourself get into a state like this. Simply absurd, she repeated. And what about, man? One man? But he's the one I want. As though there weren't millions of other men in the world. But I don't want them. How can you know till you've tried? I have tried. But how many? Asked Fanny, shrugging her shoulders contemptuously. 1, 2? Dozens. But, shaking her head, it wasn't any good, she added. Well, you must persevere, said Fanny sententiously. But it was obvious that her confidence in her own prescriptions had been shaken. Nothing can be achieved without perseverance. But meanwhile, don't think of him. I can't help it. Take Soma then. I do. Well, go on. But in the intervals, I still like him. I shall always like him. Well, if that's the case, said Fanny with decision, why don't you just go and take him? Whether he wants it or not. Whether he wants it or no. But if you knew how terribly queer he was, all the more reason for taking a firm line. It's all very well to say that. Don't stand any nonsense. Act. Fanny's voice was a trumpet. She might have been a YWFA, a lecturer giving an... Fanny's voice was a trumpet. She might have been a YWFA, a lecturer giving an evening talk to adolescent beta minuses. Yes, act. At once. Do it now. Oh, shit. What is that for? Oh, about him, just rape him. Just go and get him. Yeah. Whether he wants to or not, just take him. If you like him that much, just take him. Everyone belongs to everybody else. I'd be scared, said Lenina. Well, you've only got to take half a gram of Soma first, and now I'm going to have my bath. She marched off, trailing her towel. The bell rang, and the savage, who was impatiently hoping that Helmholtz would come that afternoon, for having at last made up his mind to talk to Helmholtz about Lenina, he could not bear to postpone his confidence a moment later, jumped up and ran to the door. I had a premonition it was you, Helmholtz, he shouted as he opened. On the threshold. Yeah, okay. On the threshold, in a white acetate satin sailor suit, and with a round white cap rakishly tilted over his left ear, stood. No. On the threshold, in a white acetate satin sailor suit, and with a round white cap rakishly tilted over her left ear, stood Lenina. Oh, said the savage, as though someone had struck him a heavy blow. Half a gram had been enough to make Lenina forget her fears and her embarrassments. Hello, John, she said, smiling, and walked past him into the room. Automatically, he closed the door and followed her. Lenina sat down. There was a long silence. You don't seem very glad to see me, John, she said at last. Not glad? The savage looked at her reproachfully, then suddenly fell on his knees before her and, taking Lenina's hand, reverently kissing it. Not glad. Oh, if only you knew. Oh, if only you knew, he whispered, venturing his venturing to raise his voice. No, and venture, he whispered, and venturing to raise his eyes to her. Admired Lenina, he went on. Indeed, the top of admiration, worthest what's dearest in the world. She smiled at him with a luscious tenderness. Oh, you're so perfect. She was leaning towards him with parted lips. So perfect and so peerless. So perfect and so peerless are created, nearer and nearer, nearer and nearer, of every creature's best. Still nearer. The savage suddenly scrambled to his feet. That's why, he said, speaking with averted eyes, I wanted to do something first. I mean, to show you I was worthy of you. Not that I could ever really be that. But at any rate, to show you I wasn't completely unworthy. I wanted to do something. Why should you think it necessary? Lenina began, but left the sentence unfinished. There was a note of irritation in her voice. When one has leant forward, nearer and nearer with parted lips, only to find oneself quite suddenly, as a clumsy oaf scrambles to his feet, leaning towards nothing at all, well, there is a reason, even with half a gram of soma circulating in one's bloodstream, a genuine reason for annoyance. At Malpais, the savage was incoherently mumbling, you had to bring her the skin of a mountain lion. I mean, when you wanted to marry someone, or else a wolf. There aren't any lions in England. There aren't any lions in England, Lenina almost snapped. And even if there were, the savage added with sudden contemptuous resentment, people would kill them out of helicopters. I suppose with poison gas or something. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that, Lenina. He squared his shoulders. He ventured to look at her and was met with a stare of annoyed incomprehension, confused. I'll do anything, he went on, more and more incoherently. Anything you tell me. There be some sports are painful, you know, but their labor delight in them sets off. That's what I feel. I mean, I'd sweep the floor if you wanted. But we've got vacuum cleaners here, said Lenina in bewilderment. It isn't necessary. No, of course it isn't necessary, but some kinds of baseness are nobly undergone. I'd like to undergo something nobly. Don't you see? But if there are vacuum cleaners, that's not the point. And epsilon semi-morons to work on them. And epsilon semi-morons to work them, she went on. Well, really, why? Why? But for you, just to show that what on earth vacuum cleaners have to do with lions? To show how much, or lions with being glad to see me. She was getting more and more exasperated. How much I love you, Lenina, he brought out almost desperately. An emblem of the inner tide of an emblem of the inner tide of startled elation. The blood rushed up to Lenina's cheeks. Do you mean it, John? But I hadn't meant to say so. Cried the savage, clasping his hands in a kind of agony. Not until... Listen, Lenina, in Malpais, people get married. Get what? The irritation had begun to creep back into her voice. Oh, what was he talking about now? What was he talking about now? For always. They make a promise to live together for always. What a horrible idea! Lenina was genuinely shocked. Outliving beauties outward, with a mind that doth renew swifter than blood decays. What? It's like in Shakespeare too. If thou dost break her virgin knot before all sanctimonious ceremonies, may with full and holy right. For Lord's sake, John, talk sense. I can't understand a word you say. First it's the vacuum cleaners, then it's knots. You're driving me crazy. She jumped up and, as though afraid that he might run away from her physically, as well as with his mind, caught him by the wrist. Answer me this question. Do you really like me, or don't you? There was a moment's silence. Then, in a very low voice, I love you more than anything in the world, he said. Then why on earth didn't you say so? She cried, and so intense was her exasperation that she drove her sharp nails into the skin of his wrist. Instead of driveling away about knots and vacuum cleaners and lions and making me miserable for weeks and weeks. She released his hand and flung it angrily away from her. If I didn't like you so much, she said, I'd be furious with you. And suddenly her arms were around his neck. He felt her soft lips against his own, so deliciously soft, so warm and electric that inevitably he found himself thinking of the embraces in 3 weeks in a helicopter. Well, I feel like in a hug sort of way. Yeah. Yeah, like in a hug sort of way. Yeah, she's not gonna kill him. She fucking wants to fuck this guy. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's weird. Um, yeah, and suddenly her arms were around his neck. He felt her soft lips against his own, so deliciously soft, so warm and electric that inevitably he found himself thinking of the embraces in 3 weeks in a helicopter. Oh, the stereoscopic blonde and ah, the, the more than real blackamoor. Horror. He tried to disengage himself, but Lenina tightened her embrace. Why didn't you say so? She whispered, drawing back her face to look at him. Her eyes were tenderly reproachful. The murkiest den, the most opportune place. The voice of conscience thundered poetically. The strongest suggestion our worser genius can shall never melt nine honor. Hold on. Sorry, I'm also getting distracted because my lips are really chapped. The strongest suggestion of our worst genius can shall never melt mine honor into lust. Never, never, he resolved. You silly boy, she was saying. I wanted you so much, and if you wanted me too, why didn't you? But Lenina, he began protesting, and as she immediately entwined her arms, she stepped away from him. He thought for a moment that she had taken his unspoken hint, but when she unbuckled her white patent cartridge belt and hung it carefully over the back of the chair, he began to suspect that he had been mistaken. Lenina, he repeated apprehensively. She put her hand to her neck and gave a long vertical pull. Her white sailor's blouse was ripped to the hem. Suspicion condensed into a too solid certainty. Lenina, what are you doing? Zip, zip. Her answer was wordless. She stepped out of her bell-bottom trousers, her zippicaminics, her zippicaminic can. Sorry, it's that weird pajama word. Her zippicaminics. Yeah, her zippicaminics were a pale shell pink. The arch community songster's golden tea dangled at her breast. For those milk paps that through the window bars bore at men's eyes. The singing, thundering, magical words made her seem doubly dangerous, doubly alluring. Soft, but how piercing, boring and drilling into reason, tunneling through resolution. The strongest oaths are straw to the fire, I the blood, in the blood. Be more abstemious or else. Yeah, the strongest oaths are straw to the fire in the blood, but be more abstemious or else. Zip. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Yeah. Zip. The rounded pinkness fell apart like a neatly divided apple. The wriggle of the arms, a lifting first at the right foot, and then the lift. The zippicaminics were lying lifeless and as though deflated on the floor. Still wearing her shoes and socks and her rashly tilted round white cap, she advanced towards him. Darling, if only you'd said so before. She held out her arms. But instead of saying darling and holding out his arms, the savage retreated in terror, flapping his hands at her as though he were trying to scare some. Ugh. But instead of saying darling and holding out his arms, The savage retreated in terror, flapping his hands at her as though he were trying to scare away some intruding and dangerous animal. Four backward steps, four backward steps, and he was brought to bay against the wall. Sweet, said Lenina, and laying her hands on his shoulders, pressed herself against him. Put your arms round me, she commanded. Hug me till you drug me, honey. She, too, had poetry at her command, knew words that sang and were spells and beat drums. Kiss me. She closed her eyes. She let her voice slink to a sleepy murmur. Kiss me till I'm in a coma. Hug me, honey, snugly. The savage caught her by the wrists, tore her hands from her shoulders, thrust her roughly away at arm's length. Ow, you're hurting me, oh! She was suddenly silent. Terror had made her forget the pain. Opening her eyes, she had seen his face. No, not his face. A ferocious stranger's, pale, distorted, twitching with some insane, inexplicable fury, aghast. But what is it, John? She whispered. He did not answer, but only stared into her face with those mad eyes. Yeah, that's where he's going. Because he was raised in a society where people got married. He was not born into the new world. Nerd. Yes, I know, nerd, but he's a sweet nerd. A confused nerd. He did not answer, but only stared into her face with those mad eyes. The hands that held her wrists were trembling. He breathed briefly and irregularly, faint almost to no imperceptibility, but appalling. She suddenly heard the grinding of his teeth. What is it? She almost screamed, and as though awakened by her cry, he caught her by the shoulders and shook her. Whore! He shouted. Whore! Impudent strumpet! Oh, don't! She protested in a voice that made grotesquely tremulous. She protested in a voice made grotesquely tremulous by shaking. Whore! Please! Damned whore! A gram is better, she began. The savage pushed her away with such force that she staggered and fell. Go, he shouted, standing over her menacingly. Get out of my sight or I'll kill you. He clenched his fists. Lenina raised her arm to cover her face. No, please don't, John. Hurry up, quick. One arm still raised, and following his every movement with a terrified eye, she scrambled to her feet and, still crouching, still covering her head, made a dash for the bathroom. He is now Bernard's level bad. Aw, come. Okay, that's a little bad. Okay, I'll give you that. But he's so confused. I have spoken. Okay. Alright. You have spoken. I have listened. Or I have read. Yeah. One arm still raised, and following his every movement with a terrified eye, she scrambled to her feet. and still crouching, still covering her head, made a dash for the bathroom. They are there are now no good characters. They are all bad people. I mean, this book is pretty bad in a horrifying sense. Yeah. One arm still raised and following his every movement with a terrified eye, she scrambled to her feet and, still crouching, still covering her head, made a dash for the bathroom. The noise of that prodigious slap by which her departure was accelerated was like a pistol shot. Ow! Lenina bounded forward. Safely locked in the bathroom, she had leisure to take stock of her injuries. Standing with her back to the mirror, she twisted her head. Looking over her shoulder, she could see the imprint of an open hand standing out distinct in crimson on the pearly flesh. Gingerly, she rubbed the wounded spot. Outside in the other room, the savage was striding up and down, marching to the drums and music of magical words. The wren goes tot and toot. The wren goes to it, and small gilded fly does lecture in my sight. Maddening. Yeah, my. Oh, you said something again. Justice Son? But are you talking about Bernard? Because Bernard is the one they want to transfer to Iceland, not John. John is the savage. Bernard is the, not the savage. John should go too. Oh, okay. That's what you're saying. Oh, shit. No, I didn't want that. I wanted the other one. There we go. My PC is running low, so... Come on. Oh my god. There we go. Yes, they do deserve each other. Gingerly, she rubbed the wounded spot. Outside? Oh, wait, no. Yeah, maddeningly, madding, madding, maddeningly, they rumbled in his ears. The fit shoe nor the soiled horse goes to it with a more riotous appetite. Down from the waist they are centaurs, the women above all. But to the girdle down, but to the girdle, but to the girdle do the gods inherit. Beneath is all the fiends. There's hell, there's darkness, there's the sulphurous pit, burning, scalding, stench, consumption. Fia, 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 pa, pa. Give me an ounce of civet. Civet. Good apothecary to sweeten my imagination. John? Ventured a small, ingratiating voice from the bathroom. John? Oh, thou weed, who are so lovely fair and smelts so sweet in the sense, aches at thee. Was this mostly goodly? Was this mostly goodly book made to write horror upon? Heaven stops the nose at it, but her perfume still hung about him. His jacket was white with the powder that had scented her velvety body. Impudent strumpet, impudent strumpet, impudent strumpet. The inexorable, inexorable, the inexorable rhythm beat itself out. Impudent. John, do you think I might have my clothes? He picked up the bell-bottomed trousers, the blouse, the zippicaminics. Open! He ordered, kicking the door. No, I won't. The voice frightened and defiant. Well, how do you expect me to give them to you? Push them through the ventilator over the door. He did what she suggested and returned to his easy pacing of the room. Impudent strumpet, impudent strumpet. The devil luxury with his fat rump and potato finger. John? He would not answer. Fat rump and potato finger. John? What is it? He asked gruffly. I wonder if you mind giving me my Malthusian belt. Lenina sat, listening to the footsteps in the other room, wondering, as she listened, how long he was likely to go tramping up and down like that, whether she would have to wait until he left the flat, or if it would be safe, after allowing his madness or if it would be safe after allowing his madness a reasonable time to subside, to open the bathroom door and make a dash for him. She was interrupted in the midst of these uneasy speculations by the sound of the telephone bell ringing in the other room. Abruptly, the tramping ceased. She heard the voice of the savage parleying with silence. Hello? Hello? Yes. If I do not assert myself, I am. Yes. Didn't you hear me say so? Mr. Savage speaking. What? Who's ill? Of course it interests me. But is it serious? Is she really bad? I'll go at once. Not in her rooms anymore. Not in her rooms anymore. Where has she been taken? Oh my God, what's the address? 3 Park Lane? Is that it? 3... Thanks. Lenina heard the click of the replaced receiver, then hurrying steps. A door slammed. There was silence. Was he really gone? With an infinity of caution, she opened the door a quarter of an inch, peeped through the crack, was encouraged by the view of emptiness, opened a little further and put her whole head out, finally tiptoed into the room, stood for a few seconds with strongly beating heart. She stood for a few seconds with strongly beating heart, listening, then darted to the front door, opened, slipped through, slammed, ran. It was not till she was in the lift and actually dropping down the well that she began to feel self-secure. It was not until she reached that she was in the lift and actually dropping down the well that she began to feel herself secure. And that is the end of chapter 13. And I think I'll do one more. Yeah, one more should be good. Alright. Chapter 14. The Park Lane Hospital for the Dying was a 60-story tower of primrose tiles. As the savage stepped out of his taxicopter, a convoy of gaily colored aerial hearses rose soaring from the roof and darted away from the park, westwards, bound for the slow crematorium. At the lift gates, the presiding porter gave him the information he required, and he dropped down to Ward 81, a galloping salinity ward, the porter explained, on the 17th floor. It was a large room bright with sunshine and yellow paint, and containing 20 beds, all occupied. Linda was dying in company and with all the modern conveniences. The air was continuously alive with gay synthetic melodies. At the foot of every bed, confronting its moribund occupant, was a television box. Television was left on. A running tap from morning till night. Every quarter of an hour, the prevailing perfume of the room was automatically charged. We try, explained the nurses, who had taken charge of the savage at the door. We try to create a thoroughly pleasant atmosphere here, something between a first-class hotel and a Feely place, and a Feely palace, if you take my meaning. Where is she? asked the savage, ignoring these polite explanations. The nurse was offended. You are in a hurry, she said. Is there any hope? He asked. You mean of her not dying? He nodded. No, of course there isn't. When somebody's sent here, there's no... Startled by the expression of distress on his pale face, she suddenly broke off. Why, whatever is the matter? She asked. She was not accustomed to this kind of thing in visitors. Not that there were many visitors anyhow, or any reason why there should be many visitors. You're not feeling ill, are you? He shook his head. She's my mother, he said in a scarcely audible voice. The nurse glanced at him with startled, horrified eyes, then quickly looked away. From throat to temple, she was all one hot blush. Take me to her, said the savage, making an effort to speak in an ordinary tone. Still blushing, she led the way down the ward, faces still fresh and unwithered, for salinity galloped so hard that it had no time to age the cheeks, only the heart and the brain. Turned as they passed. Yeah, let me say that again. Faces still fresh and unwithered, for salinity galloped so hard that it had no time to age the cheeks, only the heart and the brain, turned as they passed. Their progress was followed by the blank and curious eyes of second infancy. The savage shuddered as he looked. Linda was lying in the last of the long row of beds next to the wall. Propped up on pillows, she was watching the semifinals of the South American Riemann Surface Tennis Championship, which were being played in silent and diminished reproduction on the screen of the television box at the foot of the bed. Hither and thither, across their square of illuminated glass, the little figures noisily darted, like fish in an aquarium, the silent but agitated inhabitants of another world. Linda looked on vaguely and incomprehendingly. Linda looked on vaguely and uncomprehendingly. Okay, I don't know why that was so weird to say. Linda looked on, vaguely and uncomprehendingly smiling. Her pale, bloated face wore an expression of imbecile happiness. Every now and then her eyelids closed, and for a few seconds she seemed to be dozing. Then, with a little start, she would wake up again. Wake up to the aquarium antics of the tennis champions. To the Supervox Whirlitzer Rihanna. Yeah. To the Supervox Wurlitzeriana rendering of Hug Me Till You Drug Me Honey. To the warm draught of verbena that came blowing through the ventilator above her head. Would wake to these things, or rather to a dream of which these things transformed and embellished by the soma in her blood, with a marvelous constituents, and smile once more her broken and discolored smile of infantile contentment. "Well, I must go," said the nurse. "I've got my batch of children coming. Besides, there's number 3. She pointed up to the ward. "Might go off any minute now." "Well, make yourself comfortable." She walked briskly away. The savage sat down beside the bed. "Linda," he whispered, taking her hand. At the sound of her name, she turned. Her vague eyes brightened with recognition. She squeezed his hand. She smiled. Her lips moved. Then, quite suddenly, her head fell forward. She was asleep. He sat watching her, seeking through the tired flesh, seeking and finding that young, bright face that which stooped over his childhood in Malpais. Remembering, and he closed his eyes, her voice, her movements, all the events of their life together. Streptococci to Banbury tea. How beautiful her singing had been, and those childish rhymes, how magically strange and mysterious. A, B, C, vitamin D. The fats in the liver, the cods in the sea. He felt hot tears welling up behind his eyelids as he recalled the words and Linda's voice as she repeated them. And then the reading lessons. The tot is in the pot, the cat is on the mat, and the elementary instructions for beta workers in the embryo store, and long evenings by the fire in summertime on the roof of the little house, when she told him those stories about the other place, outside the reservation, that beautiful, beautiful other place, whose memory, as of a heaven, a paradise of goodness and loveliness, he kept whole and intact, undefiled by contact with the reality of this real London, these actual civilized men and women. A sudden voice of shrill voices made him open his eyes, and after hastily brushing away tears, look around. What seemed an interminable stream of identical 8-year-old male twins was pouring into the room. Twin after twin, twin after twin, they came. A nightmare. Their faces, their repeated faces, for there was only one between the lot of them, puggishly stared, all nostrils and pale goggling eyes. Their uniforms tacky. All their mouths hung open. Squealing and chattering, they entered. In a moment, it seemed the ward was maggoty. with them. They swarmed between the beds, clambered over, crawled under, peeped into the television boxes, made faces at the patients. Linda, astonished and rather alarmed, Linda astonished and rather alarmed them. A group stood plastered at the foot of her bed, staring with the frightened and stupid curiosity of animals suddenly confronted by the unknown. Oh, look, look! They spoke in low, scared voices. Whatever is the matter with her? Why is she so fat? They had never seen a face like hers before, had never seen a face that was not youthful and taut-skinned, a body that had ceased to be slim and upright. All these moribund sexagenarians had the appearance of child. Yeah, all these moribund sex. Yeah, sexagerian sexagerians had the appearance of childish girls. At 44, Linda seemed by contrast a monster of flaccid and distorted senility. Isn't she awful? Came the whispered comments. Look at her teeth. Suddenly, from under the bed, a pug-faced twin popped up between John's chair and the wall, and began peering into Linda's sleeping face. I say, he began, but the sentence ended prematurely in a squeal. The savage had seized him by the collar, lifted him clear over the chair, and with a smart box on the ears, sent him howling away. His yells brought the head nurse hurrying to the rescue. What have you done to him? She demanded fiercely. I won't have you striking the children. Well then, keep them away from this bed. The savage's voice was trembling with indignation. What are these filthy little brats doing here at all? It's disgraceful. Disgraceful? But what do you mean? They're being death conditioned, and I tell you, she warned him truculently, if I have any more of your interference with their conditioning, I'll send for the porters and have you thrown out. The savage rose to his feet and took a couple of steps toward him. His movements and the expression on his face were so menacing that the nurse fell back in terror. With a great effort, he checked himself and, without speaking, turned away and sat down again by the bed. Reassured, but with a dignity that was a trifle shrill and uncertain, I've warned you, said the nurse. So mind. Still, she led the two inquisitive twins away and made them join in the game of Hunt the Zipper, which had been organized by one of her colleagues at the other end of the room. Run along now and have your cup of caffeine solution, dear, she said to the other nurse. You're still not forgiving John just because his mom's dying? You're not forgiving him? That is true. That is true. Run along now and have your cup of caffeine solution, dear, she said to the other nurse. The exercise of authority restored her confidence, made her feel better. Now, children, she called. Linda had stirred uneasily, had opened her eyes for a moment, looked vaguely around, and then once more had dropped off to sleep. Sitting beside her, the savage tried hard to recapture his mood for a few of a few minutes before. ABC, vitamin D, he repeated to himself, as though the words were a spell that would restore the dead past to life. But the spell was ineffective. Obstinately, the beautiful memories refused to rise. There was only a hateful resurrection of jealousies and ugliness and miseries. Pope, with the blood trickling down from his cut shoulder, and Linda hideously asleep, and the flies buzzing around the spilt mescal on the floor beside the bed, and the boys calling those names as she passed. Oh no, no, no. He shut his eyes. He shook his head in strenuous denial of these memories. A, B, C, vitamin D. He tried to think of those times when he sat on his knees, and she put her arms around him and sang over and over again, rocking him to sleep. A, B, C, vitamin D, vitamin D, vitamin D. The Supervox Wurlitzerania had given rise to a sobbing crescendo, and suddenly the verbena gave place, in the scent circulating system, to an intense patchouli. Linda stirred, woke up, stared for a few seconds bewildered at the semi-finalists, then, lifting at the stared up for a few seconds bewilderedly at the semi-finalists, then, lifting her head, sniffed once or twice at the newly perfumed air, and suddenly smiled, a smile of childish ecstasy. Pope, she murmured, and closed her eyes. Oh, I do like it so, I do. She sighed and let herself sink back into the pillows. But Linda, the savage spoke imploringly, don't you know me? He had tried so hard, had done his very best. Why wouldn't she allow him to forget? He squeezed her limp hand almost with violence, as though he would force her to come back from the stream of ignoble pleasures, from these base and hateful memories, back to the present, back into reality, the appalling present, the awful reality, but sublime, but significant, but desperately important precisely because of the imminence of that which made them so fearful. Don't you know me, Linda? He felt the faint answering pressure of her hand. The tears started into his eyes. He bent over and kissed her. Her lips moved. Pope, she whispered again, and it was as though he had a pailful of order thrown into his face. Anger suddenly boiled up in him, balked for the second time. The passion of his grief had found another outlet. It was transformed into a passion of agonized rage. But I'm John! He shouted. I'm John! And in his furious misery, he actually caught her by the shoulder and shook her. Linda's eyes fluttered open. She saw him, knew him. John! But situated the real face, the real and violent hands in an imaginary world. Among the inward and private equivalents of Patchouli and the super Wurlitzer, among the transfigured memories and the strangely transposed sensations that constituted the universe of her dream, she knew him for John, her son. But fancied him an intruder into that paradisal Malpais where she had been spending her summer holiday with Pope. He was angry because she liked Pope. She was shaking her because Pope was there in the bed, as though there were something wrong, as though all civilized people didn't do the same. Everyone belongs to every... Her voice suddenly died into an almost inaudible, breathless croaking. Her mouth fell open. She made a desperate effort to fill her lungs with air, but it was as though she had forgotten how to breathe. She tried to cry out, but no sound came. Only the terror of her staring eyes revealed what she was suffering. Her hand went to her throat, then clawed at the air she could no longer breathe, the air that, for her, had ceased to exist. The savage was on his feet, bent over her. "What is it, Linda? What is it?" His voice was imploring. It was as though he were begging to be reassured. The look she gave him was charged with an unspeakable terror, and it seemed to him reproach. She tried to raise herself in bed, but fell back onto the pillows. Her face was horribly distorted. Her lips blew. The savage turned and ran back up the ward. "Quick! Quick!" he shouted. "Quick!" Standing in the center of the ring... Hold on. Okay, here we go. Standing in the center of a ring of zipper-hunting twins, the head nurse looked around. The first moment's astonishment gave place almost instantly to disapproval. "Don't shout. Think of the little ones," she said, frowning. "You might decondition. But what are you doing?" He had broken through the ring. "Be careful!" a child was yelling. "Quick! Quick! Quick! Quick!" He caught her by the sleeve, dragged her after him. "Quick! Something's happened! I've killed her!" By the time they were back at the end of the ward, Linda was dead. The savage stood for a moment in frozen silence, then fell on his knees beside the bed and, covering his face with his hands, sobbed uncontrollably. The nurse stood, irresolute, looking now at the kneeling figure at the bed, the scandalous exhibition, and now, poor children, at the twins who had stopped their hunting of Zipper and were staring from the other end of the ward, staring with all their eyes and nostrils at the shocking scene that was being enacted around bed 20. Should she speak to him? Try to bring back a sense of decency? Remind him of where he was? Of what fatal mischief he might do to these poor innocents? Undoing all their wholesome death conditioning with this disgusting outcry, as though death were something terrible, as though anyone mattered as much as all that. It might give them the most disastrous ideas about the subject, it might upset them into reaching the entirely wrong, the utterly antisocial way. She stepped forward. She touched him on the shoulder. She stepped forward. She touched him on the shoulder. "Can't you behave?" she said in a low, angry voice. But looking around, she saw that half a dozen twins were already on their feet and advancing down the ward. The circle was disintegrating. In another moment, no, the risk was too great. The whole group might be... No, the risk was too great. The whole group might be put back 6 or 7 months in its conditioning. She hurried back towards her menaced charges. "Now, who wants a chocolate eclair?" she asked in a loud, cheerful tone. "Me!" yelled the entire Bokanovsky group in chorus. Bed 20 was completely forgotten. Oh God, 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 the savage kept repeating to himself. And the chaos of grief and remorse that filled his mind, that filled his mind and was, and the chaos of grief and remorse that filled his mind and was the one articulate word, God. He whispered it aloud. God. Whatever is he saying? Said a voice, very distinct, very near, distinct and shrill through the warblings of the super Wurlitzer. The savage violently started and, uncovering his face, looked round. 5 khaki twins, each with a stump of a long eclair in his right hand, and their identical faces variously smeared with liquid chocolate, were standing in a row, pugly goggling at him. They met his eyes and simultaneously grinned. One of them pointed with his eclair butt. Is she dead? He asked. The savage stared at them for a moment in silence. Then, in silence, he rose to his feet. In silence, slowly walked towards the door. Is she dead? Repeated the inquisitive twin, trotting at his side. The savage looked down at him, and, still without speaking, pushed him away. The twin fell on the floor and at once began to howl. The savage did not even look round. And that is the end of chapter 14. And we will leave off there. But yeah, I think that is, not to be scared of death. Yeah, I think you're right. Wait, where did I stop? Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Alright. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.